Get out of the truck now." Sergeant Boyd Mercer didn't wait. He yanked the door open before the window was fully down, grabbed the man by the collar of his work shirt, and hauled him onto the gravel shoulder like he was unloading cargo. The man's thermos hit the asphalt and cracked. Coffee spread across the white line like a dark stain. "Get your hands where I can see them. Don't you move. Don't you breathe funny." His partner, Deputy Craig Sullins, stood by the cruiser with his arms crossed, watching the fields, watching the sky, watching anything except what Mercer was doing. Mercer leaned into the cab, came out with a canvas bag, unzipped it on the hood, work gloves, a sandwich in a Ziploc, a worn Bible with a rubber band around it, and a white envelope. He opened the envelope, counted slowly, deliberately, holding each bill up to the late afternoon sun. $800. He whistled low. That's a lot of cash for a man with Mississippi plates driving a 10-year-old truck. "It's my wages, sir. I get paid in cash on Fridays." Mercer tucked the envelope into the breast pocket of his shirt, patted it twice. "Not anymore. Suspected drug proceeds. County seizure policy. That's my rent money. Please, sir. My rent is due Monday." Mercer wrote something on a pink slip, pressed it against the hood, handed it over without making eye contact. "There's your receipt. Now get back in your truck, turn around, and don't let me catch you on this road again." The man stood there holding the pink slip with both hands, shaking. 3 cars passed on the 2-lane highway. None of them slowed down. Mercer had been doing this for 11 years. Same stretch of highway, same routine, different faces, same fear. But that particular Friday afternoon, the truck 2 vehicles behind the one Mercer had just pulled over belonged to a woman he had never seen before and would spend the rest of his life wishing he hadn't. Lenarda Osei woke up at 5:30 that morning the way she always did. Not from an alarm. From habit. 32 years of early mornings had made an alarm redundant. She made tea, not coffee. Earl Grey, 2 bags, steeped exactly 4 minutes. She stood at the kitchen window of her house in the state capitol and watched the neighbors' sprinklers run their cycle in the gray pre-dawn light. Her husband Kwame was still asleep upstairs. He taught constitutional law at the university and kept different hours. The house was quiet the way she liked it. The kind of quiet where you could think without interference. On the counter next to her mug sat a folder, red tab, 3 inches thick. She'd been working the case inside it for 7 months. Lenarda was 61 years old. She wore reading glasses she kept pushed up on her forehead. She drove a 9-year-old Buick with a dent above the rear wheel well that she kept meaning to fix and never did. If you saw her in the grocery store, you'd think, retired schoolteacher maybe, church organist, someone's favorite aunt. You would not think, director of field investigations for the State Bureau of Civil Rights Enforcement. That was the point. She had spent 32 years building cases against people who abused institutional power, crooked building inspectors, rigged municipal contracts, landlords who ran calculated discrimination schemes so subtle that their lawyers could argue coincidence right up, until Lenarda put the data in front of a judge, and the coincidence evaporated into pattern. She had a gift for pattern, always had. She didn't talk about her work at dinner parties. She didn't introduce herself with her title. She had learned early on that the moment people knew what she did, the conversation shifted, either into performance or into defensiveness, and neither one was useful. The folder on the counter was a preliminary intake, complaints from 3 separate individuals, unconnected, who had all reported the same experience on the same stretch of 2-lane highway in the same rural county 2 hours south of the capital. All 3 were black. All 3 described being pulled over by a heavy-set sergeant with a thick neck and wrap-around sunglasses. All 3 described having cash taken from their vehicles. All 3 described receiving a pink seizure receipt and being told to drive away and not come back. It wasn't her case. Not yet. The Bureau had a queue, and this was near the bottom of it. Someone had flagged it for routine follow-up in the fall. But Lenarda had a personal errand that took her through that county on Friday afternoon, and she had learned long ago that the best way to understand a road was to drive it yourself. She pulled out of the Capitol at 2 in the afternoon with her Earl Grey in a travel mug and the radio off. Her personal dashcam, a small matte black unit mounted behind the rearview mirror, blinked its steady red light. She'd installed the habit along with the camera after her sister, Abina, told her the story that had redirected the entire course of Leonarda's career. Abina had been 26, a night shift nurse driving home from a 12-hour shift. A county deputy had pulled her over on a road like this one, accused her of possession, tossed her purse across the hood of his cruiser, and taken $60 that was supposed to cover her electric bill. She filed a complaint. The complaint went into a drawer. The drawer stayed closed. Leonarda had been 29 when Abena told her. She was working her second year in the Bureau's administrative division, reviewing complaint intake forms. She remembered sitting across the kitchen table from her sister and feeling something settle in her chest like a stone finding the bottom of still water. That was the day the work became personal. She turned onto the two-lane county road at 3:30. The fields were wide and flat, recently cut, the stubble pale gold in the afternoon light, the kind of road where you could go 10 minutes without another car in either direction, the kind of road where things happened that no one would officially remember. She came up over a low rise and saw it. A truck pulled onto the shoulder, a heavy-set man in a deputy's uniform standing at the driver's window, flashlight on even in full daylight, aimed directly at the driver's face. A second deputy leaning against the cruiser, looking at the fields. Leonarda slowed without stopping. She noted the cruiser's unit number, the badge plate on the shoulder of the standing deputy. She drove past at exactly the speed limit, eyes forward, and pulled off the road 3/4 of a mile ahead, behind a screen of scrub brush near a drainage culvert. She watched in her rearview mirror. 5 minutes later, a black man in a work shirt climbed back into the truck. He drove past her without noticing her parked there. The windows were up. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she could see his hands on the wheel. They weren't steady. The cruiser sat on the shoulder for another 2 minutes. Then it pulled back onto the road and headed in her direction. Leonarda sat still. The cruiser passed her without stopping. She waited until it was out of sight. Then she pulled back onto the road. She drove the rest of the way to her errand, thinking about those hands. She called the Bureau's after-hours line from the parking lot of the hardware store, where she'd gone to pick up a replacement part for the back porch door. The errand had taken 12 minutes. The phone call took longer. She gave the intake officer the cruiser's unit number, the badge plate number she'd memorized when she drove past, and the exact time and milepost location of what she'd witnessed. She described the stop in the precise language she had used in hundreds of formal reports. Officer initiated stop, approached driver with flashlight in daylight conditions, returned to cruiser, returned to driver's vehicle. Driver appeared to hand over document from inside the cab. Officer appeared to place document in breast pocket. Driver was directed to return to vehicle and depart. She did not say what she suspected. She did not need to. The intake officer, a young woman named Tess, who Leonarda had worked with for 6 years, was quiet for a moment after she finished. Then Tess said, "Do you want me to flag this for priority review?" Leonarda said, "Pull everything we have on that unit number first. Every stop report filed from that cruiser in the last 5 years. Every seizure receipt, every complaint received, and every disposition noted. Have it on my desk Monday morning." She hung up and sat in the truck, her personal vehicle, no bureau plates, nothing that identified her, and she let herself feel what she always made herself feel before the work began in earnest. Not rage, not satisfaction, not the righteous clarity that people assumed she must feel, just the weight of it, the accumulated weight of all the Abinas, all the work shirts and cracked thermoses and rent envelopes, all the pink slips with their bureaucratic language that translated, in plain English, to "You don't matter here," and "Nobody is coming." She gave herself 90 seconds with that weight. Then she started the engine. By 8 o'clock Monday morning, Leonarda was at her desk with a cup of Earl Grey and a stack of files that made her go very still for a long moment before she opened the first one. Her investigator, a man named Theo Bassett, who had worked with her for 9 years and was constitutionally incapable of being rattled, was already at the table across from her. He'd been in at 6. The files were arranged in chronological order with colored tabs. Sergeant Boyd Mercer, 14-year veteran, assigned to County Road Patrol in Linden County. 641 documented traffic stops on a specific 11-mile stretch of highway in the past decade. The stretch Leonardo had driven Friday, 81% of stopped drivers were black. Linden County's black population, 9%. Civil seizure receipts tied to Mercer's stops totaled $437,000 over 10 years. Drug charges resulting from those stops, 0, not 1. Not a single arrest, not a single gram logged into evidence. Just cash taken under the authority of a pink receipt and a fabricated odor of marijuana. And drivers sent down the road with nothing but a piece of paper and the very clear understanding that complaining would make things worse. 46 complaints had been filed with the county over the years. Each one had been processed through the desk of Captain Darla Fenn, the department's internal affairs coordinator. Every single one was marked, reviewed, no actionable finding, complaint closed. Bassett placed a printout in front of Leonardo. It was a spreadsheet of the complaint closures with dates, complainant names, and Fenn's signature on each one. Same signature, Bassett said. Same two-sentence disposition. Same day of closure on 23 of the 46, which means she didn't investigate them. She received them and immediately closed them. He nodded. There's more. He set down a second file. 3 of the complainants had filed again after their first complaint was closed. 2 of them noted in their second filing that they had received phone calls from the county sheriff's office after their first complaint was submitted. The calls had come from unregistered lines. The callers had not identified themselves. Both complainants described the calls as warnings. Leonardo read the descriptions without expression. Then she set the file down carefully. "Pull the phone records," she said, "and get me the name of whoever had the county's unregistered outreach line assigned in those months." "Already started," Bassett said. She looked at the stack of 46 complaint files. She thought about the man in the work shirt. She thought about his hands on the wheel. How many didn't file at all? She said. Bassett was quiet for a moment. "That's what we're going to find out," he said. It took 11 days to build the formal case file. Bassett and 2 junior investigators worked through the seizure receipts, cross-referencing names against DMV records, locating individuals, making calls. The response rate was something that would stay with all 3 of them for a long time. 41 people agreed to speak on record. 41, in a single county, on a single stretch of road, all black, all reporting the same sequence. The same fabricated smell, the same search, the same envelope or wallet or money clip removed and pocketed, the same pink receipt, the same instruction, drive away and don't come back. The money they described ranged from $40 to $2,200. Grocery money, rent money, tuition, a week's wages. A birthday gift for a grandchild that never arrived. One woman, a retired postal worker named Celia Grant, had been stopped 3 separate times over 4 years. Same road, same deputy. It filed a complaint after the first stop and received one of the anonymous warning calls. She did not file again. She had not driven that road in 2 years. She was sitting at her kitchen table when Bassett called her. When he told her the Bureau was opening a formal investigation, she didn't say anything for so long that Bassett thought the line had dropped. Then she said, "I started telling people not to take that road. I just started telling everybody I knew, take the longer way around, don't go through there, because I knew nobody was listening." "We're listening now," Bassett said. "I know," she said. "I know you are, but there's going to be people who drove that road and you'll never find. People who just took it as the cost of driving, while black in a county that didn't want them there. People who never filed anything because they already knew what happened to filings." She was right. They both knew she was right. That was the part of the case that didn't show up in spreadsheets. The invisible number, the one that couldn't be measured. Leonardo sent the formal case package to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI Civil Rights Division simultaneously. She had worked 3 decades in this business, and she had not survived it by trusting local resolution when local infrastructure had been compromised from the department level up. Captain Fenn had buried 46 complaints. That didn't happen in isolation. That was policy, even if the policy was never written down. The warrant came through on a Wednesday. Mercer was sitting in his cruiser at his usual spot, same stretch of highway, same speed trap, same coffee in the cup holder, same radar gun on the dash, Sullens in the passenger seat. Two black federal SUVs pulled up behind the cruiser. Then a bureau vehicle. Leonarda did not come. It was not her role to make the arrest, and she had no interest in theater. Special Agent Marcus Webb stepped out of the first SUV. He walked to Mercer's window and tapped once. "Sergeant Mercer, step out of the vehicle." Mercer looked in his mirror, frowned. "What's this about? Step out, please." Mercer stepped out. The morning was clear. There was no wind. On the far side of the fields, a tractor was making slow passes in the distance, too far away to see the details of what was happening on the road. Webb handed him the document. "This is a warrant for your arrest. Charges include theft under color of law, civil rights violations under federal statute, evidence tampering, filing false official reports, and systematic fraud." Mercer looked at the document. His face cycled through a sequence of expressions. Confusion first, then the beginning of outrage, then something that wasn't quite fear, but was adjacent to it. The face of a man whose rules had always governed this road, suddenly discovering that different rules existed and had been applied retroactively to every single thing he had ever done here. "This is a mistake," he said. "I've been on this force for 14 years. "We know," Webb said. The handcuffs closed on a stretch of highway Mercer had believed belonged to him. Sullens was taken to a separate vehicle. He requested counsel, then changed his mind, then requested counsel again. By mid-afternoon, he had opted to cooperate. He sat in an interview room for 4 hours and walked the investigators through 14 years of stops, receipts, planted evidence, and the conversations he'd had with Mercer in the cruiser on quiet nights when Mercer would count the week's seizure total on the seat between them and say, almost admiringly, "People just keep driving this road." Sullens had never taken money himself. He had told himself for 14 years that this distinction mattered. The investigators let him finish explaining why he thought that before informing him that under federal statute it did not. Captain Darla Fenn was called into the county administrator's office on Thursday morning. 2 bureau investigators and an assistant U.S. attorney were waiting. They had her email records. The specific emails, time-stamped, in which she had acknowledged receiving complaints against Mercer, and responded to her administrative assistant with a single instruction: file and close. Not review, not investigate. File and close. Fenn tried several approaches in sequence. She cited department protocol, inadequate training, administrative backlog, and finally, a version of events in which she had reviewed the complaints and found them, in her judgment, insufficient. The assistant U.S. attorney slid a single document across the table. It was a timeline showing that 23 of the 46 complaints had been marked closed on the same day they were received, in 3 cases within the same hour. "That's not a review," he said. "That's a cover." Fenn was suspended without pay pending federal charges. Her office was sealed. Her county-issued devices were seized. She left the building through the back entrance, and the few county employees who watched her go noted that she walked very quickly and did not look at anyone. The dashcam footage was the prosecution's first exhibit at trial. Leonarda had submitted her personal unit from the Friday she'd driven that road. The footage showed 47 seconds of what she had witnessed from a distance. Mercer at the truck window, the flashlight visible, the driver's posture, the moment when the driver reached inside the cab and handed something over, the moment when Mercer turned and walked back to his cruiser with his hand in his breast pocket. But the Bureau's investigation had also surfaced something else. 3 of the 41 cooperating witnesses had personal dashcam footage of their own stops. 2 had forgotten they'd recorded anything. 1 had kept the file for 4 years and backed it up to a cloud account every month, against the day someone finally asked. That footage went in as Exhibits B, C, and D. The jury watched Mercer reach into his own vest pocket and remove a small plastic bag, watched him hold it up, watched him place it in a stopped driver's hand and say, "Look what I found." 12 jurors. Not one of them looked away. Celia Grant testified on a Tuesday. She wore a blue blazer and took the stand without visible nerves and answered every question in the precise, unhurried way of someone who had been waiting 4 years to be asked. She described the first stop, the second, the third, the calls afterward, the decision to change her route, the 2 years of driving 45 minutes out of the way to avoid an 11-mile stretch of road that was technically a public highway. The defense attorney asked her on cross, "Isn't it possible the officer had legitimate reasons for each stop?" Celia looked at him with an expression that was not hostile and not emotional. It was simply the expression of a woman who had been a postal worker for 31 years and had therefore encountered every variety of human dishonesty. "The first time," she said, "maybe. The second time, I started to wonder. The third time, I knew. But wondering and knowing didn't matter because I'd already found out what happened when you put it on paper." Mercer's defense tried 4 approaches over 2 days. He argued that civil asset forfeiture was legal county policy, which was true and irrelevant to the planted evidence. He argued that his stop rates reflected the composition of through traffic on that road, which the prosecution's traffic analyst dismantled in 40 minutes with publicly available commercial vehicle data. He argued that the dashcam footage from the cooperating witnesses was circumstantial. The judge allowed that framing until the third exhibit showed Mercer's hand, his own hand, removing a bag from his vest and placing it beside a driver's wheel well, at which point the framing became difficult to maintain. He argued that he had served Linden County faithfully for 14 years. The prosecutor said, in her closing, 14 years is not a defense. 14 years is the scope of the crime. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. They came back on a Friday morning. Guilty, every count. Mercer stood when the verdict was read. He put one hand on the table. His attorney said something to him that he didn't appear to hear. Judge Adora Selby spoke for 9 minutes before sentencing. Her voice was level throughout. She did not raise it once. "You were given authority," she said, "to protect the people who travel these roads. You converted that authority into a private revenue system. You stole from people who had no recourse. You fabricated evidence against people who had done nothing wrong. You threatened people who tried to report you. And the institution that should have stopped you chose, deliberately and repeatedly, to look the other way." She paused. "The law exists to prevent exactly what you did. This court intends to mean that. 13 years federal, no parole for 9, full restitution to all identified victims, $437,000, to be paid from seized assets, permanent ban from law enforcement in any capacity, a fight." He was escorted out in handcuffs through a side door. The sound of it closing carried to the back of the full courtroom. Captain Fenn was charged separately with obstruction and dereliction. She pled to a reduced charge 3 months before her scheduled trial. She received 18 months and a permanent revocation of her law enforcement credentials. Sullins received 2 years probation, mandatory community service, and separation from the department. He moved within 60 days. No one at the county office asked where he went. The county instituted mandatory dashcam systems with automatic cloud upload. If the camera went offline, the stop was legally void. An independent oversight board was seated with subpoena authority. Traffic stop data by race would be published quarterly, publicly, going forward. Every seized asset would require judicial pre-approval. These were not small things. They were the things that Celia Grant had been told, implicitly, did not apply to the stretch of highway where she drove. Lenarda drove Route 11 on a Saturday in October. Same 2-lane road, same flat fields, same pale gold light of afternoon. The speed trap behind the tree line was gone. The shoulder where the cruiser used to park was empty. There was a new sign at the county line. Laminated, official, smaller than she would have liked. It read, "All traffic stops in this jurisdiction require body camera activation." She slowed to read it. Then she kept driving. Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her sister Abina, calling from Cleveland. She picked up. "Hey," she said. "Hey yourself," Abina said. "I saw the coverage. Quam sent it to you." He did. "I told him not to." "I know. He told me." A pause. On the other end of the line, Lenarda could hear the particular silence of someone assembling a sentence from materials that had been sitting unused for a long time. "I testified," Abena said, to the bureau when they called. "Bassett came to Cleveland. I gave him the full statement. Everything I remembered." "I know," Lenarda said. "I saw." Another pause. I filed a complaint back then, Abina said. I really did file it. I always wondered if anyone ever read it. Someone read it, Leonardo said. It took 32 years in the wrong circumstances, and I'm not going to pretend that's acceptable, but someone read it. Abina was quiet. You drive home safe, she said finally. I will. She hung up. The road stretched ahead, wide sky, wide fields, the kind of afternoon that made the whole world look simple from inside a moving car. She thought about Celia Grant. The restitution check would arrive in 6 to 8 weeks, according to the disbursement timeline. 4 years of driving 45 minutes out of the way to avoid 11 miles of public road. There was no check large enough for that specific calculation, but the money was real, and it had been taken, and the law had required it back. She thought about the man in the work shirt. The investigators had identified him through the unit number and the stop records. His name was on a seizure receipt from that Friday 4:37 in the afternoon. He'd received his restitution notice by certified mail. Bassett had spoken to him on the phone. He'd been quiet for a long time after Bassett explained why he was calling. Then he said, I kept that pink slip. I don't know why I kept it. I knew it wasn't right. I kept it in my glove compartment, and I just kept it. That slip was now Exhibit A7 in a federal case file. She thought about the invisible number. The people who drove that road and were stopped and lost money and never filed anything and never told anyone and just rerouted their lives around 11 miles of highway and called it the cost of driving in a county that didn't want them there. She did not know how to count that number. She did not know if it could be counted, but she thought about it every time she thought about the case. She thought about it because she thought that was the right thing to do. To let the uncountable number sit in the accounting alongside everything that could be measured. To not let the clean totals make the work feel finished. She pulled into her driveway at 5:15. Kwame was on the back porch with a book and a glass of iced tea, the way he usually was on Saturdays when the weather allowed. He looked up, saw her face, didn't ask anything. She sat down in the chair across from him. He poured her a glass from the pitcher without being asked. They sat for a while without talking. Finally, Kwame said, Abina called me. I know, she said. She said she'd been meaning to call you for 3 months and couldn't figure out what to say. Leonardo looked out at the yard. The neighbor's sprinklers had come on again. The light was going flat the way it did this time of year, just before it disappeared. What did she end up saying? Leonardo asked. Kwame smiled. Just that you always knew how to see what other people decided not to look at. She thought about that for a moment. She thought about 32 years of files and complaints and patterns and data. She thought about a pink slip in a glove compartment kept for 7 months by a man who knew it wasn't right, but had no way of knowing whether that knowledge would ever matter. She thought about how many people drove Route 11 today, and yesterday, and the day before, and how many of them drove it without the blue lights appearing in their mirror. Just drove, the way everyone was supposed to.